Guten Morgen, herzlich willkommen beim Filmfest München. Good morning. Welcome to the Munich Film Festival and happy Pride, everybody. I'm Patrick Heidmann, and I have the big pleasure of moderating this panel about queer empowerment in the 1980s in Chicago and Rio. And we have wonderful guests, so please welcome from the show Oxygen Masks Don't Drop. No, what's it called? Oxygen Mask Will Not Drop Automatically. We have director Marcelo Gomes and actor Ícaro Silva. And from the documentary Move Your Body, The Birth of House, we've got director Elegance Bratton and producer Chester Algernal Gordon. So maybe I should tell the audience first when they can see your film and TV show, because obviously you haven't seen it yet. Oxygen Mask Will Not Drop Automatically. It's having its world premiere this afternoon at 3:30 at the HFF, so please come watch it. It's also going to screen on Tuesday again. And Move Your Body is having the screening tonight at 7 p.m. at the Münchner Kammerspiele. And we'll screen again tomorrow at 4 and also next Sunday. And I can highly recommend both of these shows and films. Since I might be one of the few people who've seen them, we can maybe talk about your project first a little bit before we dive deep into queer empowerment. Elegance and Chester, it's a documentary, obviously, about the birth of House. When and why did you decide to make a documentary about that? And how much maybe was the queerness of it all one of the factors that interested you?
Thank you, and thanks for coming. Move Your Body, The Birth of House is about what it sounds like, the birth of house music in Chicago. So in the late 1970s, there's an event called Disco Demolition, where 50,000 white Chicagoans showed up to Kaminsky Park, a baseball stadium, with black music, a record in their hands, and they blew all that black music up with the goal of ending black dance music forever. And little did they know that one of the ushers of that evening was Vince Lawrence, a 14-year-old who was saving up money to buy a synthesizer on which he would write and produce the first house song. So, that's why I wanted to do the project. This idea that, especially in the times we're living in, where authoritarianism, fascism, exclusion is seemingly a virus that's just taking over the planet, if we hold on to our values, we hold on to our vision of a fair and just society, and we dance with each other, we can change the world. And in terms of the queerness, house music is a soundtrack of my queerness. I came up in the 90s going to clubs in New York where, in my family home, there was a lot of restriction around my queerness and my identity. And then I got to go to these clubs, and all of a sudden, the things that I was being bullied for at school and at home became superpowers. And house music is a soundtrack to that liberation. So for me, house music is a shining example of how queer people all over the world teach everyone what it means to be free and how to be free.
That's a brilliant explanation of why you did this film. And I think we'll discuss this a little bit more later, but maybe let's talk about your show, a very different project. It's a TV series, and we're screening 2 episodes here in Munich. Marcelo, you're not the creator, but you're one of 2 directors of the show. What interested you in the subject of HIV in Rio in the 80s?
When the production company, Modern Films, invited me to direct the series, I was really touched. First of all, because I was a teenager in the 80s in Brazil, and the series is set up in Rio de Janeiro in the 80s, was just about in the moment that Brazil was getting rid of a dictatorship that was more than 25 years. Was the moment that the young people was happy in the streets and go out and started the clubs. And the first gay clubs goes on and on and on. And all of a sudden appeared the HIV epidemic in Brazil. And the government didn't do anything about it. The disinformation was completely, and it started in the press, started a kind of a horror about the disease. Some, with the headlines that I remember, and I was really young, like the cancer, the AIDS cancer, the cancer of the gay people, was really scared. Apart from that, the Minister of Culture didn't do anything. So the gay community started, to help each other. There were some flight attendants that they used to do the road New York, Rio, and AZT, that was the first drug that was approved in US. The government of Brazil didn't approve the drugs, so some flight attendants used to do as mago to bring AZT to Brazil to save people's life. So it's a story about solidarity in a kind of a very sad moment of intolerance. And when I read the script, I said, wow, that's the story that you have to tell to the young generation that have no idea how was the 80s, and to be aware that with the moment that you have nowadays in the world, that, lots of right-wing movement trying to destroy, the whole historical rights we had all over the world, they have to know how these people fight. Fight to have a kind of health program for HIV, create a kind of a network of solidarity that Ícaro's character is like that runs the organization that helps people, and that's amazing, how people got strong. And nowadays, Brazil has got one of the most important health projects for HIV. Brazil broke the patents of the medicines because the queer organizations did a pressure, political pressure for that. And someone said that the most beautiful rainbows appear when you have a thunderstorm. And I think this is what happened in Brazil.
Ícaro, maybe you can tell us a little bit about your character. You play Raul, who's an activist. He works at a gay club, and he becomes this fantastic drag queen. Tell me a little, or us, about him and why you were interested in playing that role.
Yeah, Raul, Raul is a very powerful character because he wants to be a drag queen. He's like a aspirant drag queen, and his mother, his drag mother, is the first one in the club who dies from HIV. And before she dies, everyone is like in negation. Is that the word? Negation? No, not negation. In denial. I'm sorry. And sorry, a lot of languages in my head right now. But in denial, a lot of people are in denial at this time. The government, like Marcelo just said, is doing shit, so it's doing nothing. So Raul is one of the first people who start to see that this disease, this virus that nobody knows much at that point, he starts to see that this can destroy what they have accomplished from to this time. We're in which year? We're in 87 here. Yeah. We're in 87, so as Marcelo said, we've just left the dictatorships like 5 years ago. So Brazil is in a new kind of fresh era. People are trying to be more free, and these young people are trying to be more free and trying to be who they are, because even without even without the dictatorship, Brazil is still to the day it's a very conservative nation. So I think he's the first one who can see that this will be like something very that they're going down, that they're going a very long way down. So yeah, he becomes an activist. He does not get infected with the virus, but all his friend does. So he's the one who starts to put it into that community mind that they don't have anyone to take care of them. That people won't take care of them if they themselves won't do that.
I think you were born in '87, so
Yeah, I was born in
I was
87.
wondering how much of that, how much of that queer history did you know before taking on that part?
When I was young, when I was like 10 years old, HIV, I mean, in Brazil, the first law to take care of people who live, who used to live with AIDS or HIV was launched in 1996, right? So it was like a 10-year of a silent epidemic, you know, just with the queer people screaming for help. And there was a lot of there's still to today a lot of prejudice, but there was a lot of prejudice and people. There was this very horrific case of a serial killer in São Paulo who started to kill gay people, and the whole the society started to like support him. You know, there's a lot of interview from the 80s when the reporters like asked, what do you do about this all this gay people being killed and people in the streets say, and they don't say in an evil way, they say in a very practical way, like, oh, I think they're right, I think they should be killed, yes, I think it's the best way for our country. So that was the scene. And when I was like 10 years old in 97, AIDS was like a ghost. I'm from this generation who grew with this ghost of HIV. It was not like an epidemic, we're not an epidemic anymore, but it was like a ghost. And there was a lot of misinformation, you know, about that. So it was like the gay cancer and this kind of stuff. So I grew with this ghost, but the younger generations, I think they didn't quite got it, you know, that part of time where prejudice was so spread about it. And yeah, I think when I got into the series, I got with this point, you know, to show to the younger generation something that I've seen, but I didn't see actually, right? But I something that I felt when I was younger. Yeah.
Before I go on, I just realized that these waters are not open, and I think
Oh, the
I
mics are
need
not
some.
open.
I don't know about
Okay.
you.
So sorry. Hope we were talking loud enough.
No, no. Does anyone want water?
Thank you.
But I'll just have it.
Oh, there's a lot of stuff here.
Yeah.
There's even beer if you want beer.
Slow down.
What I like so much about these two projects, that they're very different, of course. You made a documentary, you made a fictional TV show, and they are set in very different parts of the world, but they talk, accidentally or not, about very similar things. I mean, it's about racism, it's about homophobia, it's about queer people taking their destiny in their own hands in a way. And they're both very specific, I feel, to the time and place that they're set in, and yet talk about universal topics. And for you guys, for example, I was wondering about the Chicago-ness of it all. I mean, it's no coincidence that House started in Chicago, but maybe you can tell us a little bit about why you think that is. Why didn't it start in New York or San Francisco?
Well, technically, it did start in New York, and Frankie Knuckles is from
True.
Frankie Knuckles is from New York, and he the Bronx, and Frankie was really good friends with Larry Levan. And house music, I think, was a sound at first. It was like old disco, funk, and R&B records. And it was a culture that was birthed before the genre, because genre is just when things get put on wax and then they're commodified, and now there's a label put on it of how it's to be sold and who it's to be sold to, essentially. And so Frankie came to Chicago and started DJing at schools, actually, like Mendel's, and he would have like literally 1,000 kids just dancing in a room, all in unison with each other, like just on the same beat. It was almost like church. And a lot of other DJs in Chicago heard this and they saw this and they enjoyed it, especially Vince, our main character. And Vince, who was saving up for a synthesizer, really wanted to put this sound on a record. And he did with his friends in his basement, essentially.
Yeah, what makes house music, as a genre have to happen in a place like Chicago ultimately is segregation. Chicago is a highly segregated place to this very day. The north side, like if you're from the north, it's hard to go to the south. From the west, it's hard to go to the east. And all of these boundaries, while either are both ideological, they're imagined, and they're also physical. So if you're a young Black person in Chicago in the early 80s who has a vision of doing something that could transcend those barriers, it absolutely requires white collaboration. So in that regard, Chicago creates the conditions under which you have to have a club like the Warehouse where gays can go and party. And as a result, because Black kids are kind of like, quarantined into their ghettos, the only place that kids like Vince Lawrence and his friends could go to party were those gay clubs, even though these kids were straight. So what ends up happening is that you have people, young, straight, working class to middle class Black kids in predominantly gay clubs. And as a Black man, in the world, I imagine, but definitely in the United States, there's a very limited idea of what freedom looks like. A lot of times you're fighting for rights and fighting for a way to be that you've never experienced and the people in your family have never experienced. So then you go to a place like the Warehouse and you see these Black men with their shirts off, gyrating, you see them laughing, you see them kissing and smiling, and you see them interacting with women in ways that you've never seen men and women interact before. And for people like Vince in our film, that became a model. And they were like, we have to put this on wax so that we can take this freedom with us and wherever we go. So, and on a more kind of practical level, this film was embraced by the Chicago house community. The film, Chicago is a character in the film. And it's kind of funny, I think, in this documentary, for me, what I realized is if you ask someone to describe the best time in their life, the best party they ever went to, you're very likely to get even so many answers, and so many people want to participate. And that's how it worked out with this film.
And I love how the people in the film, or the kids back in that day, found empowerment and the freedom in the freedom that house music gave them. While as in your show, I feel the empowerment comes from actually losing somewhat of the freedom because of AIDS, and everything seems to be closing in on them, right?
Yeah, that's true.
And I was wondering, speaking of the specific places that these stories take place in, because you can tell a story about young queer people and AIDS in every country in this world, but having it set in Brazil, in this very Catholic country, it plays differently, of course. And you talked a little bit about it already, but tell us a little bit more about Brazil in the 80s and why AIDS was even more devastating than maybe in other places there.
Right. Well, as I said, we are living a dictatorship. There was a kind of very strong power in the right wing. Brazil is a very Catholic country as well, and the Catholic Church was really concerned about the AIDS, saying that was a sin for that kind of people. And the government decided don't do anything. So in Rio de Janeiro, some doctors and some people from the queer community decide to work together. If the government is not doing anything, let's do it something. There was a Fiocruz, there's a foundation in Rio, that they started to go to gay clubs in Rio. That was the beginning of the gay scene in Rio. People were like, oh my God, finally in Rio we can have gay clubs to go. In my hometown, there was no gay club. I used to read about the gay clubs in Rio. I was like, wow. And they used to go there to inform people about how, the condom stuff, how to prepare, how to explain. Because in the beginning, people were so scared that some of them used to neglect the idea that it was a kind of AIDS thing. They would say, no, that's something of the Americans. They have in America, not here in Brazil. And in America, you had a president that was really terrible in that time, that's Ronald Reagan. Yeah. And he did a terrible thing. The worst. Yeah.
Hopefully he's in hell.
Yeah, sure, for sure. And there's the new one that hopefully is going to go to hell soon.
Well, he's going to make hell happen on earth if he doesn't go soon.
And you know, and the government in Brazil was from the right wing, so they said, let's do what the Americans do, you know, let's do anything, because Reagan did do anything, and many people died because that policy, you know, and some infectologists and some doctors decided to work with the gay community and do something, and they did a kind of a conscious work first, because that was the first problem. And then, because the pressure of the society, the government decided to do some advert to explain people about the HIV. And it was even worse. It was a horror thing. I was kid in my house watching things like, if you make sex with someone that you don't know, you're gonna die. It was like something like this.
If you get it, you're gonna die.
Yeah. It was really scary. And you put some adverts in our TV series. And to young people that watched the series, they say, I can't believe that this existed. That's the amazing thing. They couldn't believe that this existed in Brazil. So apart from that, some groups of queer people decided to create an association that's for life. Because the whole advert in the government, it's, you must die, you're gonna die, you're gonna die. And they said, let's make an association that's for life, that get people together and create a chain of solidarity, and let's talk about life. And they created this idea that I am a HIV person living my life. It's not about to die, it's about to live and have people to have a normal life. So we pressure the government with this association, more than one. There is one guy that's called Herbert Daniel, that was very important, and he passed away. We want to create this idea of the queer day for Brazil in the day that he passed away. He was really important to help people up, and as well the artists, yeah. And we put that in the series. The artists, famous artists from the soap opera, and some singers, they were the first one. They said, "Okay, I have HIV." For the press, and people used to love them, and people get, wow, we have to people this. You have to help these people. The public opinion started to understand how important was. These two things, I think, the queer community and the gay artists that decided to say in the press, yeah, to come out. Because everybody, many people used to be in the clothes in Brazil in that time that was so conservative. So that pressure among the artist community and the gay community did a revolution in Rio, you know. And the doctor, Marcia Rashid, we brought her for the TV series, and for the art, you met Marcia Rashid.
Yeah, of course, I met her.
She's one person that, until today, she works with people to explain the HIV treatment and stuff, because nowadays in Brazil, that's something important. Nowadays in Brazil, we have many cases among young generation. They neglect the idea of the HIV, like the people in the beginning of the HIV. They commit the same mistake that people commit in the 80s. And I think this series is important to explain to the young generation they cannot commit the same mistakes that people did.
Well, that's the thing. It's like we are in democratic societies, you're socialized into thinking that the government, and mind you, it should be true, the government is there for your protection. It's there for your possibility of thriving, right? But I think, you know, especially talking about the Reagan era in the United States, we're talking about post-civil rights, right? The gays, the women, they were causing hell for these people. And then all of us for these conservative right-wingers. And then all of a sudden, here comes a disease that kills the liberals, that makes it such that the shame that the Stonewall rebellion, that generation in the late 60s, the shame that they worked so hard to dismantle, here comes a disease, a modern disease that can make a grotesque and visual death upon a person who rejects conservative values, even though many conservative-facing people died from this illness. So I think the lesson that, you know, I take from, I can't wait to watch it, but I'm imagining I'm going to take from your film, and I take from that generation from our film, is that you must take your destiny into your own hands. You cannot assume that these systems of power are for you, because there are many forces who want it to be the opposite. They want to use the system to destroy us. So if you're sitting around waiting for democracy to work for you, it will never work for you. You must get up and make it work for you. And the only way you do that is by being bold, unapologetic, and creating that pressure that you speak of upon those who have power to dispel their narratives of shame and to create actual pathways towards thriving.
You almost answered my next question already.
Right. I love when I do that.
Because I have the same question for you. Why do you feel is your film important now, and maybe more important than, say, 5 years ago?
These conservative, fascist, autocratic sons of bitches are burning books in America as we speak. We are seeing masked men whose only authority to enforce the law is that they were born with the right skin color and the right sexuality and the right passport. And they are running into people's homes that speak different languages from them and eat different food from them and dragging them out and putting them into concentration camps as we speak in the United States. Move Your Body to Birth a House shows MAGA, right? These white folks went to a base, just again, they brought they brought their disco records that they paid for, mind you.
And stolen from their parents.
And stolen from their parents, stolen from their big brothers. They brought them to a baseball stadium so that they could blow this music up in public. This wasn't about blowing up music. This is an ideological lynching. They are letting black people in a place that is segregated like Chicago know that you cannot leave where we tell you to be. You are not allowed. And if you do, look at what we do to your records. Imagine what we'll do to you. Stay put. That's the message in 1979, and that's the message right now. They're trying to scare us into being frozen in the stereotypes that they built for us so they can exploit and kill us, right? So, you know, you asked earlier, why did I make this film? One of the reasons I made this film is because people, I think, take queer culture very lightly. They assume that, you know, you pay your ticket to go to the party, you stay up all night, you get drunk, hopefully you meet someone, and then the sun rises, and then you're supposed to forget all of that freedom that you've experienced in the club, and that queer culture is ephemeral and disposable, that we are people who just die of AIDS. We're not gonna be around, we don't make kids, we're not contributing to society, and I think that that's bullshit. You know, what Move Your Body proves is that queer people are essential in a free society, that our culture is an example of what democracy actually looks like in real time. And that's why they're scared. If our collective power wasn't a threat to the status quo, then why do these people spend so much time trying to tear us apart? We must constantly form community. We must constantly demand our space in the world, and we cannot take no for an answer. And we can do it while we're dancing. That's the best part.
And it really shows, and both of these stories do, how empowerment is so closely linked to pain and trauma and violence, always, right? I mean, maybe you can, how do you see the relationship between trauma and empowerment?
When your body says it's enough, I think everybody's born, that like your DNA carries trauma and memories in it from your family and your ancestors. And I think that, you know, that memory, it starts to react at a certain point when a person's had enough and they just can't take anymore. It's like the Palestinians, you know, it's like they've had enough of being under someone's foot, you know, and they wanted to do something about it, you know, and I think that, like, you know, oppression's everywhere in the world, you know, and it takes one person to lead a bunch of people, and little tiny things, I think, creates these huge ripple effects. And I think that we're seeing it right now. We're seeing youth all around the world say, we don't want what you baby boomers want. We don't want to go backwards in time, you know? And I think because they've had enough, they're tired of what their parents and grandparents are saying, essentially.
Do you, for all of you who are artists and filmmakers, do you feel a responsibility to empower people? Is that something that drives you creatively?
I think, you know, I know this is a politicized conversation, but, you know, on a more fundamental level as an artist, there's nothing more empowering than seeing the work of another person that speaks to your experience and lets you know that you're not alone. And that can be as, you know, pivotal as the work that y'all are creating, that we're creating, but it can also be as incidental as, you know, sometimes I'll go to a museum and I'll see, you know, Van Gogh's interpretation of a sunset, and I'm like, oh my God, that's how sunsets feel. Wow. Someone in the world 200, 300 years ago felt the exact same thing I felt about this moment. And that's empowering, right? To see something that you've imagined, that something that you maybe experience, and you can't really put a word on it, right? Then here comes this work of art that puts it out there for you. And now you can just point people to that thing and say, oh, right, you see, that's what I'm talking about. I don't know how to say it, but if you watch this incredible show, if you watch this documentary, it says it for us. And then now we have a way to talk about it, right? I think if anything, the most empowering thing is communication. And that's what artists do. We communicate, we express our experiences, we share them so that we can find other people who feel the same way. And that creates a movement, it creates change, it creates identification. And all of this collective identification, this is what the powers that be do not want us to do. They want us to be in our cubicle, they want us to be in our little treadmill, focused on our little survival, for us to forget that our survivals are inherently linked. There is no such thing as individuality without community. There is no community that isn't filled with individuals. This is undeniable, and we must always find ways through our art. So I do feel an obligation to empower people through what I do, whether that's, you know, explicitly political or just in a sense of like sensation and experience, right? I want people to interact with my work and to come out of it changed, because that's what doing this work does for me.
I also think queerness is not just your sexuality. I think it's a point of view and a mindset. I think that you can be straight and be queer, you know, because I think
everybody's queer.
Exactly, because queerness is being an outsider, essentially. Like a lot of Black people are queer technically because of their outsiders in all of their societies around the world. So, you know, yes, I don't think you're just gay when you're queer, you know, or a lesbian or trans or non-binary. You know, there's a lot of people who are queer, and they're not just outliers, they're queer, you know?
I think it is, I'm sorry. I think it is kind of an obligation, but it's something of a continuation, you know? Like in the Brazilian Black community, we have this word which is from an African concept, which is Ubuntu. That means I am because we are. So I feel connected with the ones who came before me. I remember when I watched the first time I watched the documentary Paris is Burning.
I love that film.
I love it. And the first thing I did after I watched it was to search for them. To search for them all. I was like, oh my God, where they are? I want to see them. I want to watch them. You know, and they were all dead. You know, they were all dead, and it got me very emotional, especially about Venus. I can't remember her extravaganza, Venus extravaganza. I got very emotional because she was 23 and she was killed at that same year. You know, she was brightened so much on that documentary. And when I think about them, when I thought about it, it was like, oh my God, I have to continue that. You know, I have to. They're all dead, but they're keeping talking to me. You know, so I just must keep going, keep what they started. So I think it's about that obligation. It's more about the continuation. You know, I know. Unfortunately, we won't get there where we want to be, where we want this world to be in our time, because our life's short. Even if we live 100 years, it's a short life. It's a short period of time. So I think it's about continuation. It's about to bring what they were doing, and especially to empower those young people so that they can do what they were doing there in the 80s and before them. You know, I think it's about that.
And it's also, I don't know, I thought it was some applause coming.
Sorry, so sometimes it's so to explain it in English. I was catching the words.
A role like the one that you play now in Oxygen Masks, I mean, that must be a gift, because a role that speaks to your identity as a black queer man probably doesn't come around, you know,
Yes,
all the
that's
time.
something I always say in Brazil. Like, we have a very, as we said, we have a very conservative ways of thinking, a lot of conservative ways of thinking in Brazil, and we're still dealing with the racism, we're still dealing with people understanding that we are racists, you know, because Brazil has the eugenics in Brazil worked very good. Racism is the most powerful technology in Brazil, you know, because it worked. It worked, you know, it worked a lot. A lot of black people don't see themselves as black people and don't understand what it is to be a black people, you know. So I have a lot of this, my friends, but straight white guys, straight white guys who plays straight white guys on the TV, and there's always a straight white guy being the main character of a telenovela. So all my straight white friends are doing them, you know. And for a long time, I had to not pretend, because that's acting, but for a long time I did a lot of characters of straight black characters, you know, acting a bit of side of my lane, you know, because I didn't want to be without working. So to have this character where Johnny is the main character, Fernando. In the first week of the series, we were like, oh my God, we can be so sassy here. It's so nice. We can be so damn gay. That's so good, you know. To be ourselves and to be telling our own stories and to put that. To put the parts of our story that people are not used to see, you know, on TV, especially on open TV, because we're still conservative, you know. So yes, it is a gift. And now I can say to my straight white friends, hey, I'm a black gay man doing a black gay man. Here I am.
And you are wonderfully sassy, and because the show, and maybe we should say that the show is really a lot of fun, even though it is about these very heavy topics. The tone is rather light. Marcelo, maybe you can tell us a little bit why the tone of the show is not just tragic and heavy, and how does that help the empowerment of it all?
That's the idea. People are trying to live freedom, to enjoy life, and that we have the pandemic, but they are not going to be sad because of the pandemic. They're going to fight. That fight for life. And people in Brazil are very relaxed, and they love to make jokes, and they get together and smile, and said, no, we are not going to leave this apart. Let's talk about the tragedy. It was a tragedy. But as well, to give a kind of a sense of freedom, of happiness to all characters. And from that, as well, the solidarity, you know. Ícaro's character is responsible, you know, to create this network of solidarity without knowing how to do, you know. He was just trying to understand what's going on and said, we have to do something. We have to do something because the government is not going to do anything. And they created the chain of the solidarity that's beautiful and saved many people's life. And this is a real story. This story happened. These people, exist. I met the flight attendants. I met the people that was making shows in the clubs in the 80s. They exist. They were real people. Some of them passed away, but some of them are there fighting. And the amazing thing is, it looks like that our society doesn't learn from the past. Because what happened 4 years ago? We had a conservative president that wanted to re-elect and say that he's going to destroy the culture of the country, and saying that he had a kid that was gay, it would better that he would die. It's Bolsonaro. So we started to make again a group of people that, among the queer community, among the artist community, to say to people, look, we have to put this guy out of the government. It's impossible. The guy that was responsible to kill more than 1 million people during the pandemic of COVID, because he didn't bring vaccines to Brazil. The same thing happened in the 80s, where the government didn't bring AZT to Brazil. And we said to the queer community, to the artists, so we're going to re-elect this guy, and this guy is going to be together with Trump and Milei in Argentina. That's going to be a nightmare. Let's organize ourselves. And for young people, they say, oh, you don't care, we don't care about Bolsonaro. Hello, you have to care, because our future is about ourselves. And it was amazing that now, in August, you are going to release this series, and in October, Bolsonaro is going to the jail. Hopefully, Trump is going to be in the jail soon.
Hopefully.
Oh, yes.
Graveyard.
It's amazing. We just saw yesterday in Hungary that beautiful demonstration. That was amazing. We have to keep fighting. We have to keep fighting. It was amazing. The president of Hungary said there won't be a demonstration. There was like 100,000 people there. That's beautiful. Beautiful what happened yesterday.
Yeah, they threaten. The Hungarian situation is so inspiring because Viktor Orban threatened to fine people and to jail people for up to a year if they were a part of Pride. And 100,000 people showed up and said, fine us all, arrest us all, put us all in jail. And he ain't do that. It doesn't mean that the fight is over, but
He understands.
But he gets that it's going to be a fight. And I think that's what we are now. It's like we have to, it's just, I think the thing that is most tragic to me about the HIV epidemic, I was talking to someone about this the other day. We talk a lot about all of the artists and all of the leaders that we lost. What we never talk about is the audience that we lost. All the people who would have received the work that we're doing, and the
dances that were never danced, the songs that were never released, the books that were never written, the poems.
And a lot of time. You turn on Netflix and you see these AI monstrosities that dominate Netflix, and you're just like, who's watching this crap? Why is this thing that I love not number one? And it's so good because the audience have been killed, allowed to die. So, what are we going to do about that? We must unite around the work that matters to us. We must make sure that these are the artists of our time that are doing the work that matters, that they get supported, they get blasted. So I'm so grateful for an opportunity like this because it allows us to connect to the audience and to say, like, let's grow ourselves. We are not alone. 100,000 people marched in defiance of a fascist dictator and won the day. All you got to do is win the day. You keep winning the day. Eventually, the tide will turn.
Your word in God's ear, or whatever they say. So, if any of you have questions, yes, please. There's one in the back.
Powerful voice.
Yeah, save your voice. Save your voice.
Thank you. Something that is very inspiring to me from all your beautiful contributions and your perspectives, as I'm listening here, is the interconnectedness of Black music to liberation. The way that you just described it as like, I might say ideological lynching, the way that they blew up those records, you know?
Yes.
It reminds me in a way, kind of, because it's also set on the backdrop of Chicago, of the movie Sinners.
Yes.
In a way where it's like this black liberation happening through musical expression. When you now also look at the beautiful Brazilian series that I can't wait to watch, maybe you can speak on something that also came up, the trick of using genre to categorize and to downplay, and what your opinion is on music and culture in general as a conduit for change.
Wow. I'm trying not to sound old now. 'Cause I feel like the oldest thing you can do is be like, well, back in my day, music was good, and now it's horrible. You know, I think music, and black music is protest music. That's the other thing. Like, you know, to your earlier question about empowerment, do I feel obligated, and, you know, how do you keep it light? Move Your Body is a party, intentionally so. This is a party. Parties are meant to create release. And as much as there are heavy topics in the film, this is a film about rooted in what does it mean to have a good time in spite of all the shit that is thrown down on you. And I think that question is central to black music in the Western Hemisphere. You know, people who've been enslaved, kidnapped from their homes. The only thing you have is the music to remind you of who you were before you were seen as a slave, you know? And that kind of core truth is the seed to every black musical formation there is. And when it comes to genre is business, it is capital. It's the appearance of the object, whether that's a cassette or a CD or a painting or even a film, right? All of a sudden now, once it's been genreified, it allows it to be consumed by everyone. And then once it's consumed by everyone, inevitably, that initial spark of protest, of resilience, of resistance becomes diluted, you know? So when I look at modern, contemporary, corporate black music, whether it's hip hop or, you know, even, I don't even know if I could define jazz music as black music anymore at this point. You know, when I look at it, I see that, you know, when I'm hip hop generation, you know, so I came up, that was the ghetto CNN. All the things that you saw on the news about your hood that was racist and wrong, these rappers came in and provided context. And we were so proud of that. And we were so moved and motivated by that. And then the corporate guys come in and are like, oh, they like killing each other. Great. Let's just make 1 million songs where black people kill each other. They like drugs. Great. Let's make a new drug trend with every hip hop song we hear. You know, so I think that a part of being a consumer is having a certain level of rational skepticism about what you are ingesting. And I think, you know, contemporary mainstream black music is rife for scrutiny right now. And we need to be asking ourselves, who are the producers, who are the executives, even in films, the things that we see. Like, one of the things I've become aware of in this trip to Germany is, you know, for a lot of German black actors, you are up against what does it mean to be a German, and how inevitably being black or being Arab is inherently un-German. Thus, people are fighting for scraps to be seen, and it is outrageous, you know, and it is highly normalized. I had a cab driver the other night to this party we went to. Yesterday, an Afghanistani. Like, so he asked us where we're from, and we're like, we're from America. And he's like, great. And I asked him where he's from. He's like, I'm from Afghanistan, but I'm not a jihadist. And I was like, I didn't call you a jihadist, so I don't know where this comes from. And he's like, oh, I was just joking, because when I'm in Germany and I drive white people, they're the ones who ask me if I'm a jihadist all the time. So he was essentially telling the joke before I could, right? That's the culture of corporate media representation in Germany. And that has to be interrogated. That has to be destroyed, right? When you and mind you, these things have real world consequences, because one of the things I'm grateful for being an American who's a legacy of slavery is that at least my people were there at the beginning of America. So there's always a chance to play a slave. There's always a chance to you know what I mean, be a prostitute. There's always, you know what I mean, like there's always a chance to kind of get a rung in there because we were essential to the founding of our nation, right? And I think now it's about articulating that in the global experience of Blackness, wherever we ended up after those initial extractions from the continent, right? Has to be a new meaning of what it means to be a German. And that means that, you know, like, what are the real world consequences? If we can't imagine Black German people, then we can't ever imagine a Black German president. And if there can't be a Black German president, then how do white Germans know that they've actually atoned for the sins of their fathers, right? Going around Europe and talking to people of color who know for a fact, no matter how many children they have in these countries that they've immigrated to, they will never occupy a position of power where they can control their own destiny. That is inherently anti-democratic, and that is something that has to be undone. Thank you.
Do we have more questions?
Thank you.
Do we have more questions? Otherwise, I would have another one. And maybe a big one, but speaking about or connected to what you just said, I mean, when I see the news, when I talk to people, I could be depressed all day long. How do you guys keep up hope and
'Cause I'm right.
creative spirit?
Well, honestly, I went to Docs Against Gravity in Warsaw earlier this year, and the director of the festival brought up that right now docs are actually showing more humanity than the news in this moment. Like you get to see how other people live, but it's not a gaze that's demonizing people essentially. And like, you know, I agree with him. I've seen so many documentaries that like even on TikTok, you learn more information, actual information that's happening in places than in Instagram than the actual news, because the news right now is very conservative in every country, and you know, they're trying to separate us essentially, you know, because of what's starting to happen is it's really a class war, you know, because race doesn't exist. That's something that, like Elegance said, that was created for capitalism, you know. Every country has caste systems, you know, but I think that, you know, the way to really fight it, you know, even more than protests, is stop spending money on these companies and organizations that oppress us, you know, because we're making them richer and giving them more finances to oppress us more. And I think you really, even food, where food comes from, where our cosmetic, everything, you know, every single thing. You have to stop spending money and actually know, you know, who's behind that company. You know, like in America, Target stopped initiative for people of color. We stopped shopping at Target. And now Target has been hit hard. Starbucks funded the Palestinian genocide. You know, a lot of people stopped drinking at Starbucks, you know, and it really hit them hard. Their numbers in the stock market plummeted, you know, and it's like, that's what we have to do as well, is protest and stop spending money.
It works very well in United States. It's beautiful to see it.
How is, you said your show is coming out in August, I think, in Brazil. August.
October, it's Bolsonaro going to jail.
Exactly.
But it's an important event, please.
How do you think the show will be received? Is it still controversial in Brazil to talk about, you know, how the government failed in the 80s?
Well, that's a question, because Brazil is a country. There are so many contradictions.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, oh my God.
For example, Brazil, if you go out, you see many people holding hands, gay couples holding hands, and you see a scene of trans woman, trans men, you know, playing in many places. But Brazil is the country that has got more cases of violence against the queer community in the world. In the world. It's amazing. every time that you can see more queer people in the street, people are leaving the closet finally, we see more violence against these people because, it's a contradiction. There is a part of the society that's very, very conservative. And when we launched it in the Instagram, remember, Ícaro? We are preparing a TV series, and the subject is that many haters. Remember, many haters saying, "Oh, go to the hell. We don't need that." And there is as well an evangelic a part of the evangelical community that has got a kind of a very aggressive policy against the Afro-Brazilian religion. That's really terrible. That happened in Brazil. That used to be a country that was more relaxed in terms of religion, but now it's changing. It's changing, and the country see kind of a right wing and left wing, radicals ones, and we have to be radical because these people is destroying the country in a way, destroying that kind of hospitality that had in some moments in Brazil because it's destroying. We see a lot of hate in Brazil. And many people is going to hate our TV series, but many people, I hope, is going to love. Mainly the young people, and we are working out to persuade the young people to watch the series.
Yeah, I think it will be a hit because I think everybody knows that, but the the young Brazilian internet generation is very loud. It's fantastically loud. So as Beyonce, I have seen. Yeah, but I think it will because the power is there. The power is in their hands online, and I think it's new. It's harsh to say it's new because it's a story from 40 years ago. But at the same time, it's very new for the young people. No one has never told this story about the way we're telling, with the humanity of these characters, and not just with their tragedy or their deaths. So I think people will like it, and yes, we'll have some backlash, but I think it's kind of the normal structure in Brazil right now. You fight, and then you have backlash, and then you fight again. It's all and people. I think. Yeah, that's a fight.
Punch them, they punch you.
Exactly. So, but we're actually fighting right now because I think there was, as I said before, those prejudice those prejudice technologies like racism and eugenics, and those death technologies, they went very well in Brazil, So people are starting to. I mean, George Floyd had to die for people in Brazil to say, "Oh my God, American people has racism. There's racism here too. Did you see it?" So white people in Brazil.
Yeah.
There was the same here. George had to die.
And in France.
Exactly. So yes, America is often. It's often the example. So a lot of people, there's a lot of white guilt in Brazil right now. It's very funny. Johnny is a white guilt one. It was like, we have to do something. We have to end racism. Okay. So yes, I think people.
Do your part, Johnny.
This is good. Go, Johnny. Yes, Johnny made like a project to launch a Black queer people project. He was very guilt at 2020 at George Floyd's past. And yes, I think people are starting to realize that, and to realize how this puts our country down, because it's a very mixed country. There's no way to be racist there, because there is no races. Everybody is so fucking mixed that if you truly think about, it's like Brazilian white people who go to the United States are called Latino and get back like, they called me Latino, I'm not. I love that. They called me Latino, I'm white. You know what I mean? It was like, yeah, you just find something about yourself that you're not white. You're not quite white. So yes, I think it will be a hit. I hope so. Yes.
And this is the first TV series about the HIV. Yeah. The first TV series in Brazil about we have to start.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, you're tapping into pain and joy. Like, these are real people's memories. Their whole life, at least in America, the HIV crisis, those who were living in the epidemic defined their generation. And because you're the first, people are going to flock to it because no one's told their story before.
I want to return back to what you said about artists, right? Artists are some of the most important people of their time because artists are the people like what you're doing right now that push our society forward. You know, artists, whether you're an actor, whether you're a filmmaker, whether you're a painter, whether you're a dancer, every type of art form, you know, it's very important that people see self-expression and that one's lived experience is seen by other people that's not like them because of that's cultural exchange. You know, like I think about, what is it that I was gonna say? I forget, I lost my thought. But I think about, yes, I think about the guy who was arrested in for No Other Land in Israel. Yeah. And it took the entire academy, AMPUS, in every single country, every member of AMPUS posting on Instagram, posting on Facebook, posting on every social media network, demanding that for his release. And he was released. He was released.
Mahmoud, I don't want to get his name wrong, but the Columbia student that was intercepted by ICE and couldn't even watch his child be born because he expressed freedom of speech in a country that has supposedly the best freedom of speech in the world, you know, but he would still be locked up if it wasn't for this young generation you talk about on the internet being like, no, we don't agree with this. It has to stop, you know.
The world.
But I think if there's anything in terms of what gives me joy, what I have as an artist and a director, I fought so hard to get. Even when I make a heavy film, I have joy in it because, wow, God has blessed me to have changed my life, to not be where I was so that I could be where I am now. And me doing it is proof to other people that it could happen for them. So that gives me a lot of joy to be able to give that to people, you know. But at the end of the day, I think what I'm realizing is the conservative right is so violent that they've managed to push the center right as well. And they're not gonna really chill until the left is able to harness its own violence. That this notion, and I believe in, you know, passive resistance and Martin Luther King and all of that, but I think that diversity of thought, like the conservatives in America have colonized diversity of thought at this point, and they are bullying universities into creating, you know, basically conservative think tanks at our nation's highest universities. And honestly, a lot of their tactics, they get from us, they get from the left. They copied what our leaders did in the 60s, and they've perverted it towards their causes, and they've backed it up with revolutionary violence and radical violence on their end. My question becomes, when does the left say, we can do it too? Because these people, they don't seem to understand passive resistance. You need to have that plus something else in order for them to back the fuck up.
And just one thing, we did this series with a very low budget. Who is going to put lots of money in a series about HIV, right? But every day was really tough, wasn't it? Ícaro, to work was really tough. It was in the 80s. We had to recreate Rio in the 80s. But every day I used to wake up and say, go on, Marcelo, go on, go to work, because in the memory of all my friends that passed away in many, many years.
Thank you very much. I wish I could talk to you all day long, but we've run out of time now. Let me thank first the Rosa Luxemburg Stiftung for making this talk happen. Thank all of you for being here. And let's keep on fighting and dancing. And please thank our lovely guests for being here. Chester, Elegance, Ícaro, Marcelo.